بفرستم برای طفلای نازنینی که در کابل قتل عام شد. ما دقیق در کنفرانس قرار داریم که در کوپن ما قرار دارد و صدای شما طفلایی هستیم که اونایی که گوشاشون کر هستند، کشورهایی که مسئول این وضعیت در کشور ما هستند، صدای شما را به اینجا میرسند. شما تنها نیستین، ما نماینده و صدای شما هستیم که در اینجا به گوش مسئولین برسانیم. لحظات چند ریچارد بینت گزارشگر ملل متحد میاد اون سوالی که با ما فرستادیم ازش خود پرسیدیم و بازخواست شما خانواده‌های داغدار ازشان خود گرفتیم.
سلام علیکم. Mr. Sadat, ladies and gentlemen, friends, thank you for inviting me to your event today. I am really honored by being invited to be your guest, and you have come from different parts of Europe, and I really appreciate having had the opportunity to spend time with you. And I've listened very carefully to everything that you have said. You know, when I think about Afghanistan, and when I'm given the opportunity to talk about Afghanistan, it's really easy to know where to start. You start with Afghan women. Because while everyone in Afghanistan is going through a tumultuous and a terrible time at the moment, it's much worse for women and girls. And I've heard a number of you today, Afghan women, speak about the situation very strongly. And I would like to say that I stand in solidarity with you, and it's my honor to do that and to try and work for equal rights for women and men in Afghanistan, like in everywhere else in the world. Because you know, there are some really terrible situations in the world these days. I mean, look what's happening in Ukraine and Russia. Look what's happening in Myanmar, in North Korea, in parts of Africa. Human rights are being violated. People are being disappeared. They're being executed. They're starving. Nowhere else in the world are women treated like they're treated in Afghanistan. It's unique. The only time it's ever happened before was the last time the Taliban were in power between 1996 and 2001. History must not be allowed to repeat itself. And the world must not stay silent. I hear when I listen to Afghan women that they feel invisible. They feel that they're not heard, abandoned, ignored. And this is the reality. I hope it's starting to change. 2 weeks ago, I went to the Human Rights Council in Geneva, and for the second time, they did manage to have a special session on the situation of Afghan women. And women came from Afghanistan, they came from different parts of the world, and some were able to speak to the member states, and every member state that responded, and I counted how many states responded because I was in the meeting, 57 countries did intervene. All of them, without exception, condemned the way in which Afghan women are being treated these days. Some disagreed on other issues, but on the situation of girls attending secondary school, everybody agreed that this was unacceptable. But of course, those who had studied Afghanistan a little more knew that simply opening the doors of secondary schools above, from grade 7 and above, is not the answer on its own. It's about the quality of that education. And it's about not just that, but all the other ways in which women are repressed and discriminated against, as we've heard today, and removing that. But on the other side of this, and I saw it in Geneva, and I was in Afghanistan 3 months ago, in May, 3 or 4 months ago. The strength of Afghan women, the courage of Afghan women, the way in which Afghan women are well organized and articulate and stand up for not just for women's rights actually, they're standing up for all human rights, and they're standing for a better future for Afghanistan. So I think it's often a mistake to say Afghan women want their rights. They want everyone's rights, as far as I'm hearing. And so I really wanted to start with that issue. The second issue I want to touch on is this issue. Because this is completely unacceptable. The issue is that Hazara and actually other ethnic religious minorities in Afghanistan are being targeted. They've been targeted not just yesterday, they've been targeted for years. And it's not getting any better. Actually, the Islamic Republic was not very good at protecting Hazara either. In Dashti-Bachi, there were many attacks going back many years. They started around 2011, so more than 10 years. The protection must increase. And this tragedy yesterday relates to all the issues we're talking about. It's about attacks on a religious minority for no reason at all. What have they done? What have these girls done? And there were a few boys too. And it's about the right to education and to a future. And it's about the right of women and girls to life. So these are things that really must change. I want to tell you a little bit about my role, my job. I'm called the Special Rapporteur for the situation of human rights in Afghanistan. It's a new position. Well, it's sort of new. It's been reinvented. It did exist in the 1990s. And then it was abolished around 2004, and then after the Taliban took over in August 2021, the Human Rights Council decided it ought to have another mechanism on human rights, or a mechanism on human rights in Afghanistan, and it adopted a resolution to appoint a special rapporteur, which was a bit different from some other posts because I am given a few resources. I do have some staff. I have a team now finally put together that are based in Geneva. And I'm not a UN staff member. I'm elected. So, Mr. Mees, you and I are the ones that have been elected in this room. And I don't get paid. I do all of the special rapporteurs or independent experts in the UN are voluntary positions. We are elected by the member states of the UN, in this case of the Human Rights Council. And I think, like I mentioned before, there are 57 members on the Human Rights Council. So I don't report to the Secretary General. He's not my boss. He used to be. I used to work in the UN as a staff member. I'm not a staff member now. I'm an independent expert reporting to the member states at the Human Rights Council. And next month, I'll be going to New York. No, actually it's this month because it's October already. So later this month, I'll be going to New York to report to the General Assembly. And I get a chance to both make a written report, and I have a written report that I delivered a couple of weeks ago, and to talk, and what they call an interactive dialogue, which means to be a back and forth, the Q&A. So I'm an independent expert. I report to the member states, but I don't represent the whole UN, because there's something called UN Special Procedures. I'm one of those, and I am given the privilege of being able to speak independently and not have to follow UN policy necessarily. I can challenge it if I want to. After I was appointed, I went to Afghanistan in May, as I mentioned. I met with the Taliban. This is quite significant because I have access. I was received at senior level. I met with a number of ministers, met with one of the deputy prime ministers. I was able to, I didn't have long there, only 11 days, but I was able to go to Mazar-e-Sharif in the north and Kandahar in the south, as well as to Kabul. And by the way, I first went to Afghanistan in 2003, and I probably lived about 5 or 6 years altogether in Afghanistan since then. So I'm somewhat familiar with the country, which was probably one of the reasons why I was appointed to this position. I was able to meet with the Taliban leadership, and I also spent time meeting especially with women's groups, with journalists, and with lawyers, judges, prosecutors. And I want to come to that shortly, because in addition to stressing the issue of women and of I think Afghanistan is probably a country of minorities, the way I know this isn't controversial, but of the rights of religious and ethnic minorities. I also want to talk a little bit about the situation of the rule of law in Afghanistan, since this is a gathering of Afghan lawyers in Europe. One of the things that has happened, as you all know better than me, since the Taliban took over, and in the UN system we call them de facto authorities, which is not a recognition of, it's de facto rather than de jure. So they are in fact have some control, but in law they're not recognized. And the UN does not recognize the Taliban, and it was already mentioned that they're not able to speak at the General Assembly or any other UN forum, and that is something that they very much want to do. But I just want to mention something about the way in which the institutions of a conventional state of good governance were swept away when the Taliban took power. The Constitution was set aside, the 2004 Constitution. I mentioned I went to Afghanistan a long time ago, and I was really privileged to be one of the few foreigners, internationals, who spent 3 weeks in the tent in the constitutional lawyer Jirga in 2004. So I actually was there when this constitution was debated and discussed, and I had the privilege of attending lawyer Jirga. So to see that set aside when Part 2 of the Constitution, Chapter 2 of the Constitution, guarantees the rights and freedoms, including the rights to life, to freedom of expression, to equality of men and women, to right to education, protection from torture, amongst others, is very sad. Not only that, there's been a shrinking of civil society space. A number of ministries and institutions have been abolished, like the Ministry of Women's Affairs, the Ministry of Peace, the Election Commission, and the Human Rights Commission, the Independent Human Rights Commission. The Parliament, both houses, as you know, has also been dissolved. And while the press is still doing its best, and thank you to the gentleman who spoke on behalf of journalists, it's under a lot of pressure. And we cannot say that there's press freedom in Afghanistan anymore. So, and then finally, all of the judges, well, the Taliban will say they were not fired. And I asked them about this, and no, they still have their jobs. When I talked to them, they said, well, we didn't get fired, we don't get paid, and we can't go to work, so what's the difference? So many judges, all of the 2,000 or so judges, of which 258 were women, have more or less lost their jobs. Some of them have left the country, some of them are living there, I met them, and they're living in fear, not only from the Taliban, but because of the fact that the prisoners were all released. Those who they were presiding over at the time were released, and so they are living in fear of reprisals, and there are real reprisals, also against prosecutors. So the institutions of a state, which are the checks and balances on the excesses of authority of any government, are no longer there. No elections, no constitution, no parliament, no really trained legal system, no freedom of the press, no human rights commission, civil society squeezed. So this, I think, how can you have an open society and accountable system when that's the case? I'm interested in asking you, because I'm sure you're following this very closely, what is the situation of the administration of justice? Because it's very hard to understand what the situation is now. Yes, the courts are functioning in that there are mullahs who have replaced trained secularly trained lawyers, but which laws are applying? And do people have the right to a defense? Do they have a right to a defense counsel, for example? It seems not. And in any legal system, if you don't know which law applies, then the application of justice is arbitrary. It's almost worse, I think, to have no law, or not knowing which law applies, than it is to have bad laws. And this is, I think, the situation in Afghanistan at the moment. I covered this to some degree in my report, if you want to take a look at it, and of course I can give you links to have a look at that. But we really want a restoration of clarity and certainty of the applicability of laws, of judicial independence, and the capacity to protect judges, lawyers, and especially women from reprisals. And a number of women speakers today have noted how the laws that over 20 years were put in place, such as the Igbo law, to protect women from violence, have also gone away, as has most of the shelters. There are still some shelters kind of operating underground for women who are escaping violence, but the official ones are no longer able to operate. So I had a bunch of notes to read to you, and I haven't used them at all. So I may have missed out some things, but I've probably just about spoken for long enough. And I wonder, Mr. Sadat, whether after I say one final thing, if we have a bit of time for some questions. Would there be some time? Because I quite like to respond to questions. Is it okay? Could I just say one final thing, though, before we go to that, which is, and others have said it too, what is going to change things in Afghanistan? And others who've spoken here have said something that I'm hearing from other places, and I agree. The change needs to come from within. From the outside, we can try to do something, we can try to put on pressure, and you're asking the UN to do different things, and there's the Security Council, which I'm not involved with, there's the Human Rights Council, which I am involved with, there's a UN mission, there's all the agencies in Afghanistan, but ultimately the change will need to come from within. And we've seen brave women protesting, despite being repressed. And I think there were more today who were arrested after protesting against what happened yesterday. But I think that supporting that change from within is where there are some possibilities. Women are leading that resistance. And it was also mentioned, for example, I think we're seeing maybe a few signs, I'm interested in your feedback, that the Taliban is not unified. An example would be, perhaps, when in Paktia province a few weeks ago, the schools opened for 1 week. They opened with the agreement of the ulama. They were closed down from Kabul or from Kandahar. But the religious elders in Paktia agreed with them opening. And yes, the girls protested the next day when they were closed, and that was great, but they were still being supported by their religious elders. And in Uruzgan, the same. In Kandahar, the same. Those are 3 provinces that are the heartland of the Taliban. So I take hope that if there is something happening there, then maybe over time there is a chance for change. And there are those, and I was told that there are 5 people who are keeping the girls' school closed. 5 very powerful people in a very strict hierarchy, including the supreme leader, but the majority, even on the Taliban side, are in favor of opening girls' schools. So that was my final point, Mr. Sadat, and then I'll be quiet, and I'll be happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Richard Bennett, for your deep speech, for your attention about Afghanistan, and also for your solidarity with Afghanish peoples. Thank you very much, Mr. Salam. We are also supported you in your work in Afghanistan. We are supported. This is the most important to us, supported our people. When you supported Afghanistan, we strongly supported you. Thank you very much. قسمی که آقای ریچارد بینت گفتن سوال مطلب اگر باشه دوستان میتونن که مطرح بکنن که آقای بینت جواب بگوین. اگر سوالی است مهربانی جناب دکتر صاحب بفرمایید. من تو بنوبر
Microphone.
Mr. Sadat, thank you very much. You making the meeting for the problem of Afghanistan. This is very open. What is happening in Afghanistan? Why the 2002 we attacked to Afghanistan, we removed the Taliban. Why the 2021 we returned back Taliban to Afghanistan? This is okay. This is no problem for Afghan people. We lost more from 2 million people from 1978. Because Mr. Sadat said this is 46-year war. This is not 46, this is more from 48-year wars. Because I say, if it's Pakistan in the map of the world, we never be peaceful in Afghanistan. Because everything happening from Pakistan to Afghanistan. Because I ask, why we lost our children yesterday, how much, for what? Why the school is closed for our women? Islam never say you can close school for the women. Islam say, Iqra, you must be study women and men. The study of the women is more important from the men. Because Islam respects women more from the men. This is very important. This is okay. The Afghan people, they don't have the leadership, they ask the USA, the Russia, they ask why. We lost our country, we lost our people, now we lost our geography also. Because this is the big things. I ask, for what we lost our Danish soldier, for what lost our USA soldier, how many soldiers we killed from Denmark to Afghanistan, for what we lost? I asked the human rights. This is not only the women, they're doing all the things for the women, this is the men also. Because every man is dead, this is the father, this is the son, this is very bad for the women. I ask, until what time will be happening in Afghanistan? I think this is fighting for the stone of Afghanistan. This is fighting economy. Why the world closed eyes? I ask my brother and sister, this is very important, Mr. Dr. Shatika asked, we never afraid. We must be right one day. This is very important we do for our people from we start. This is very important we make freedom from these people, what is happening from 1978. Thank you. I want to, this is very important. You ask my question from the human rights, the leader in the Libya. This is very important. Because if you say the human rights, why Dr. Asia in the jail in the Guantanamo, he is the woman, he was the doctor. He is 86 years the jail. For what? What she done? This is very important. How much, until what time we lost our children in Afghanistan? Until what time? If you look the history, 1976, we don't have only 1% poor in Afghanistan, 1%. We don't have only 1% poor in 1976. This is very important. You can question all the people. This is question not only me. But there are some people, they are afraid. Why we not ask for our people? Until what time we died? For what we died? Taliban was there. Mujahideen was there in Pakistan. But Pakistan, Shahbaz Sharif, they had asked the meeting of the New Year, Afghanistan is terrorist. Afghanistan is not the terrorist. Pakistan is terrorist in the world. This is very important. We want to stop the Pakistan. They have never sent terrorists to Afghanistan. This is everything in Pakistan. Thank you.
دوستای دیگه نظر دارن میربانی سلام صاحب شما
مقبول و زیبا حق ماست که ما باید صحبت بکنیم.
ولی چرا نیم؟ با نظر داشت وقت چرا؟
بله.
معلوم داد؟
بله.
برای همین جمع شده.
بله.
این سلطانزاده صاحب یکی از نویسنده‌های بسیار مطرح افغانستان هستند. داستان نویس، ادبیات شناس و شخصیت فرهنگی هستند و همچنان جناب غمخور صاحب شما صحبت می‌خواستین بکنید؟
نه، چون دوستا صحبت کردن، فقط ما یک کلمه می‌خواستم و رو بهتر گپ نمی‌زنم. اینا باید بفهمند که
نه از همین چه
اونا باید مهمان باید بفهمند که همین جمع شدن افغانا در اینجا نمایندگی از این میکنه که ملت ما در یک حالتی وحشی سیاسی زندگی میکنه. 36 میلیون باشنده افغانستان، اگر 34 میلیونش رو بکشیم 30 میلیون افغانستان که در اونجا نه تنها از لحاظ اقتصادی در زندان هستند بلکه از لحاظ روانی در زندان هستند. یک مسئله که ما همیشه در مطبوعات گفتیم، حاکمیتی که به کمک سازمان‌های بین المللی به نام طالب در افغانستان مسلط شد، 36 میلیون افغان در هر جایی که است او را توهین میکنه به خاطر از اینکه به خواهر ما، به مادر ما، به دختر ما، به شریک زندگی ما حق تعیین سرنوشت اجتماعی نمیده و اونا سرش حاکمیت میکنه. این توهین بشری است. اینا نماینده سازمان حقوق بشر هستند. ما گله داریم و این حق ماست که در خانه ما حاکمیت سیاسی خود تأمین نکنه. تشکر از شما که زمینه این مسائل هستید که ما بتانیم با نماینده سازمان
تشکر. درون غمخور صاحب دیر مننه. محترم غمخور صاحب در سویدن راغلی ده. اکنون دوستان گرامی ما اینجا یادداشت داریم جناب روبیل جان سکندری سلطانزاده صاحب و همچنان قادری صاحب از هامبورگ